Now, if you'd been living somewhere with no connection to the outside world since the 1970s, and you came back for someone only to tell you that the year is 2023, and the Rolling Stones have released a new album alongside the Beatles putting out a new single, you'd likely laugh, think they were lying, and go back into hiding. But well, that is what has happened indeed. And my lord, are we lucky people that even now we get to hear new music from these legends of musical history. And well, I was a fan of what I heard on Hackney Diamonds, so when it turned out the Beatles were releasing their new single Now and Then, I felt like I could finally say I'd witnessed the Stones-Beatles rivalry in real time. So it does seem what we have is the Beatles' final goodbye to each other and to fans through Now and Then, a song which features a recording of each Beatle member in some form, with guitar tracks played by the late George Harrison and the main vocal coming from the late John Lennon, with Ringo playing drums and Paul supplying bass and likely some backing vocal here and there. And as the single becomes the Beatles' 18th #1 single, it serves as a fitting and final farewell to the band, providing what seems like the last bit of closure McCartney, Ringo and fans all needed, I think. The track came from an original demo recorded by John Lennon for his solo work around the late 1970s. However, after his passing, Yoko Ono passed the recordings on to the remaining Beatles at the time, being George, Ringo and Paul, to be developed around 1995. However, it seems that at the time the Beatles weren't too happy with the final product, so the single was shelved for a later date, which turned out to be the year 2023, in which the remaining band members of Paul and Ringo were able to finish it with some modern technological touches to help freshen up the sound of the single. Now, the single itself does serve as a fitting message of how time has passed since the Fab Four dominated the 60s, and their legacy as musical juggernauts has long surpassed the impression of just being four lads from Liverpool, smashing up the Cavern Club, seemingly taking into account all the events of which has passed, and all the unforeseen unfortunate events which were to come for the Beatles as individuals after their split. And whilst the track itself isn't quite the outstanding masterpiece a few fans are claiming it to be, I certainly think it's a great single that serves as more of an iconic staple to close off that final chapter of the Beatles in a neat fashion and allows the band to finally reunite in their own way, tying off the years of what-ifs and debate that happened through the 1970s and following decades, stomping down the final quarrels which the bandmates apparently had, or why they split up, finalising all of their lives in the Beatles through a track that resembles fraternal love for one another, and ultimately missing each other and the friendships they had. I also think whether the main writing of the song from John's standpoint was about his relationship with the Beatles, Yoko Ono, or nothing at all doesn't particularly matter at this point, as the song has taken on its own meaning and life now years later, and represents something much bigger, much like songs such as These Are the Days of Our Lives by Queen, almost being needed as a fitting goodbye to those who have sadly passed away, to friends, fans, and bandmates alike. And to be fair, from a commercial point of view, it's still outstanding that both the Rolling Stones and the Beatles can release new music in 2023 and still be smashing it on the charts. I mean, what on earth is going on? It's certainly fantastic from that point of view as well. I also thought it was a nice touch that the Beatles' last ever single was released with Love Me Do, their first ever single, once again reflecting a nice tying off and complete circle for closure of the band and their time together, taking a true meaning for their single Now and Then. In the end, I suppose one might wonder what John Lennon would have made of all this, of Paul and Ringo using his past demo recordings to be reworked and released as a Beatles song. And well, I like to think that if somehow we could pass judgments based on all the events which have happened, he'd be happy that the last piece of music the Beatles release is based on his work, from a loving point of view, reflecting no malice towards the time they spent as individuals, and that they'd always be together as the Beatles in some way. So do let me know what you thought of this final farewell from the Beatles, and if you shed any man tears to this one also. As always, feel free to like and subscribe if you're new here. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.